I designed, programmed, and manufactured a new replacement Gamecube controller motherboard that fixes several issues that controllers have to make them more functional, longer lasting, and more reliable for playing competitive Melee and Ultimate. I plan on putting these motherboards into OEM shells and selling them. This project is called the Goomwave DX. How the Goomwave DX works. Notch calibration. When you hold into a notch, you want the control stick to read a specific value for doing actions like wave dashing and shield dropping. The values don't always line up because the profile of the stick box may be different or because the shape of the notch doesn't perfectly match the stick box. Normally this is solved by carving the plastic of the shell until the notch lines up with the correct control stick value. With notch calibration on the Goomwave DX, instead of carving plastic, you just press a button combination while holding into the notch and the value is automatically transformed to the correct one. Pod emulation. Pod is a phenomenon that happens when the two parts of the potentiometer begin to come apart over time due to wear and oxidation. The result is that the signals that the pod potentiometers put out are different and sometimes beneficial in comparison to new potentiometers. Pod is a complicated phenomenon that can manifest in many ways, some good and some bad. If you get really lucky, a very rare type of pod will develop which will allow you to have good dashback, good ledge dashes, good dash out of crouch, good pivots, and no snapback. Pod emulation on the Goomwave DX recreates the signal of this type of pod to give good dashback, good ledge dash, good dash out of crouch, good pivots, and no snapback. 1.0 dashes. Most controllers aren't able to consistently input full 1.0 values unless you get lucky with your stickbox profile or you have a special notch for it. 1.0 values can be important for everything from DI to aerial drift to dash speed. On the Goomwave DX, all cardinals are 1.0. Easier up tilts. On some controllers, it's easier than others to up tilt. On the Goomwave DX, up tilts are easier when pressing slightly up. Button remapping. A feature that's normally only available as a complicated and precise hardware mod is available easily on the Goomwave DX. With button remapping, you'll be able to swap the location of buttons. Ultimate trigger mode. Another feature that's normally only available as a mod is triggers that work with digital press in Smash Ultimate. Normally the only way to activate shield in Ultimate is to use the analog press. Digital press does not activate shield. In Ultimate trigger mode, the analog portion is ignored and the digital press activates an analog reading, essentially giving the effect of trigger plugs and removed springs working in Ultimate without issues. Hot swappable potentiometers. One of the most common issues in controllers is the potentiometers wearing down, called potentiometer oddity degradation effect, or POD. As your controller wears in, POD develops on the stickbox potentiometers and the slider potentiometers wear down as well. To fix this, there are small sockets in which the stickbox and slider potentiometers sit which don't require soldering to remove and replace. In addition, all Goomwave DX motherboards come with brand new, from the factory, OEM potentiometers that will last longer than the ones you find on a used controller. We will also be selling new potentiometers in the future so you can easily replace the potentiometers yourself with only a tri-wing screwdriver. How to use Goomwave DX. How to calibrate notches. Notches are calibrated by holding into the notch, then while continuing to hold into the notch, holding X, Y, L, and pressing Z. There are 12 notch positions. The 8 Firefox angles, the 2 shield drop angles, and the 2 perfect DI notches in the northeast and northwest quadrants. The 8 Firefox notch values are 0.2875, 0.95. The 2 shield drop values are 0.675, 0.725, and the 2 DI notches are 0.7, 0.7. Depending on how you approach the notch, the values might be different on your controller. If you're calibrating a wavedash notch and you approach from the top and get 0.2625, and when you approach from the bottom you get 0.2875, approach from the top so you get 0.2625, then notch. That way you'll hit the max wavedash regardless of which way you approach. Some controllers may need to be re-notched more than others depending on how consistent your stickbox is. How to remap buttons. To remap buttons, hold start and D-pad left for 2 seconds, then press 2 buttons in succession. Right after, those 2 buttons will be swapped. You can swap the button again with another button to swap the functions of even more buttons. How to enable Ultimate Trigger Mode. Hold start and D-pad down for 2 seconds. Afterwards, hold X, Y, and start to reset the controller. Now the analog sliders of the controller will be disabled and the digital press will activate an analog signal. This will allow you to shield with digital press in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. How to swap potentiometers. Open up your controller with the tri-wing, take out the motherboard, and remove the rumble housing and stick caps. Use a small flathead screwdriver or a fingernail to unclip the stickbox potentiometers. Use your fingers or a flathead to remove the stickbox potentiometers. Place in the replacement potentiometers and clip them in. It's best to use the black potentiometers with the main stick and the white potentiometers with the C-stick. For the slider potentiometers, remove the rumble housing, then use a flathead screwdriver to pry out the slider potentiometers. Place in the replacement slider potentiometers. Legality. Isn't this the same as the Arduinos that got banned? No. There were several reasons the Arduinos got banned, one of which was that they were easily hackable because they were open source and easy to reprogram with unfair macros. They also made certain things significantly easier, such as Firefox notches. However, a version of Arduinos eventually got legalized called Dweens that were used at several major tournaments when UCF was not allowed due to Nintendo. These Dweens fixed dashback and shield drops, but did not fix any of the other controller issues, such as pivots, ledge dash, dash out of crouch, and snapback. The way the notches fix and dashback fix works on the Goomwave DX is entirely different than how the Dweens and Arduinos functioned. Are the notches fair? The Goomwave DX does not work the same as the Arduinos when it comes to notches. The Arduinos worked by rounding all values near the perfect wavedash value to the perfect wavedash value exactly. The Goomwave DX works by calibrating the value to the physical location while allowing access to every stick value. The Goomwave DX scales the values to change the profile of the stick box, while Arduinos round nearby values. In other words, it takes exactly as much skill to hit the notch value on the Goomwave DX as it does on an OEM controller. It's entirely possible to get perfect 0.2875 value notches using the traditional plastic carving method. It's just exceedingly hard and requires a consistent stick box and a skilled notcher. Until the Goomwave DX, the only people with access to perfect 0.2875 value notches was modders such as myself and people who have consistent access to modders to adjust the notch values as they wear in. The Goomwave DX allows anyone to re-notch their controller as values wear in and doesn't require expensive and inconsistent access to modders. Is the POD emulation fair? POD is a natural phenomenon that occurs on controllers, and the Goomwave DX simply emulates this phenomenon. SnapBack capacitors are an analog mod that changes the analog signal of the potentiometer to more closely recreate POD. SnapBack capacitors themselves are itself not something that can naturally happen on controllers, yet they are allowed because they fix the same issue POD fixes on brand new controllers without POD. Similarly, POD emulation seeks to fix all the issues that POD naturally fixes, but on brand new controllers. POD emulation only makes controllers as good as the best OEM controllers with POD, and fixes all the issues that POD fixes, but does not go further than that. Are 1.0 dashes fair? Some OEM controllers can naturally consistently hit 1.0 values. The Goomwave DX works by rounding nearby values to 1.0 values. I don't advocate for rounding values for notches because box-style controllers don't make notches easier than an OEM controller. However, I think rounding in this case should be legal because box-style controllers have set the precedent of making it consistent and easy to get 1.0 dashes using only a button. While this does make the controller strictly better than OEM in this way, it only makes it as good as a box-style controller and not better. Are easier up tilts fair? Similarly, box-style controllers make up tilts unnaturally easy by making it a button instead of a halfway analog press to up tilt. For this reason, I have implemented slight rounding to up tilts to make them easier than an OEM controller, but not as easy as a box-style controller. Is this better than an OEM Gamecube controller? In most ways, this controller is only as good as the best OEM controller you can get. The notches, dashback, snapback, dashback out of crouch, ledge dash, and pivots are only as good as the best OEM controller you can get. However, there are some things this controller can do that make it slightly closer to a box-style controller in its capabilities, such as the 1.0 cardinals and the easier up tilts. Overall, this controller is very slightly better than the best OEM controller you can get, but not better than the best legal controller you can use for Melee, which is the box-style controllers. I believe this controller more evens the playing field by making standard controllers closer to as good as box-style controllers, as well as lessening players' reliance on expensive and unreliable controller mods such as notches and snapback capacitors. These controllers will be widely available later this year, and so everyone will be able to have a reliable, long-lasting, and functional controller for Melee and Ultimate.